Derek Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank Mr Speaker for granting this debate on the cost of post-16 education for families in the Isle of Scilly. I've yet to stand up in this chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker, unless to raise an issue that has been raised directly with me by a constituent. Today is no exception. I rise to raise an issue that has not been raised by just one constituent. In fact, several constituents, all parents, met with me last month to set out their concern. The Isle of Scilly is unique in so many ways. Situated 28 miles off Land's End, a beautiful part of the UK, fantastic part of my constituency, and I've often spoken in this chamber about the unique environment on the islands, but the people of Scilly face unique challenges also, or almost unique. As I prepared for this debate, I found that there are in fact 2 local authority areas in this country with no sixth form provision. One is the Isles of Scilly, the other is the City of London. So the situation is not absolutely unique. The consequences, however, are. Young people in the City of London can walk to a sixth form college or pay 85p for a bus ride. The buses are rarely cancelled because of stormy weather or high seas. And unlike the Solonian ferry, they run all year round. More to the point, the young people can go home to their families at the end of each school day. This option is not open to the families I met on Scilly. They know they have to send their young people to stay on the mainland to fulfil the statutory requirements. But, as one of my constituents told me, the decision about where to go was based on accommodation, not educational preference. The lucky ones could stay with family or friends on the mainland. I should perhaps say lucky one. If the council unofficial survey is accurate, everyone else had to choose between staying with a host family or a boarding school. At last year's Ofsted report into Scilly's Children's Services, it said, to access post-16 education, children must live far away from home on the mainland. This adds to the potential for social, emotional and mental health challenges and additional safeguarding risks for some children. It is not surprising but still shocking that 20% of 16 and 17-year-olds from Scilly are not in education, employment or training, 4 times the national average and infinitely more than the City of London's 0%. This, despite the fact that students on Scilly consistently outperform students on the mainland in their GCSE level attainment. The Council of the Isle of Scilly is responsible for the provision of compulsory education until the age of 18 and is expected, like all local authorities, to meet the cost of delivery from their own budget. The Council is supported by post-16 travel and accommodation grants administered by the Education, Skills and Funding Agency. The funding is currently £6,365 per student, which can go towards travel to and from the mainland and accommodation while studying. These costs are considerably more, and I'm grateful to the parents of current students who have prepared very helpful figures that show just how much more they have to fork out for their children's education. Yes, certainly, yes.
Madam Deputy, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for today for bringing this forward? Does he feel that there's something immorally wrong for a parent to have to pay for their education when across the rest of this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland the sixth form is provided, the education is provided? So if it's wrong that the parents and the children of the Scilly Isles cannot have the same advantages as we have elsewhere.
Thank you for that intervention. I'll be covering in a minute about what the injustice of it and how equality and levelling up really should apply. But I'm pleased to note that there is someone in the chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker, who also takes an interest in the Isle of Scilly. I appreciate that it's not everyone's particular area of interest or expertise. It is a beautiful remote island, I'm sure, set of islands, I'm sure, a holiday destination for many, but not always considering the challenges people face. As I was saying, the cheapest option is staying with a host family, but even this costs more than the £6,300 grant and is increasing. That is without factoring the cost of travel. 6 return journeys a year, including the transport on the mainland, costs on average £1,750 for every student. And this does not include contingency for overnight stays when travel is disrupted, despite the high risk of weather scuppering travel plans. And this weather disruption is not limited to just the winter, Madam Deputy Speaker. Everyone here will appreciate the difficulty of finding accommodation in a wonderful destination like Penzance in the peak of the tourist season. And there are obvious safeguarding issues in young people staying on their own when their journeys are disrupted. Many parents are understandably reluctant to entrust their children to host families who are currently unregulated. At an age when most young people are living with their parents, 16 and 17-year-olds from Scilly are living in digs. They lack the structure and support they need in the absence of family and friends. Some hosts become like second families, but other parents have chilling stories. One of my constituents told me that their child became very ill while living in host family accommodation. Nobody was aware because nobody had pastoral oversight. Nobody noticed him lose 1.5 stone over the course of a 6-week half-term. That student ended up with 1 A-level, having started doing 5 with top-grade predictions. There are other cases where vulnerability, loneliness, isolation and naivety have placed other students at risk, which of course I cannot divulge in a debate such as this. Colleges like Penwith and Truro College, our excellent further education college in West Cornwall, and the main Post-16 provider for Scilly have concerns. They see how often this lack of support is reflected in poor attendance and work at school. It can lead to students failing to complete their studies. According to the informal survey I mentioned, less than 2/3 of children who attended post-16 education completed their courses successfully. While colleges take seriously the challenges facing students who are required to leave Scilly to learn, their pastoral care is limited to their statutory role, which only covers the school day. Outside that period, which may only be 18 hours during a typical school week, students are left to their own devices. They may not have access to the support and extracurricular activities, such as sport and social clubs, that young people take for granted in the rest of the country. For all these reasons, homestays are becoming less popular with families on Scilly, from nearly half of students just 3 years ago to just over a quarter now. The other option available to families is boarding school, where these young people do have supervision and support. There are a number of state boarding schools in the southwest, but as was kind of hinted at by the intervention, the education itself is free, the board and lodging is not. According to the parents' figures, the shortfall can be as much as £13,000, including travel costs, per child. Again, this does not include contingencies or incidental expenses. Many students never see their sixth forms until the first time they arrive in September. The cost of visiting beforehand is not covered by the grant and is just not achievable. The cost of living is already high on Scilly because of freight costs and salaries are lower than average, and yet families on Scilly are forced to pay for their 16 and 7-year-olds to have the same opportunities as everybody else. What is more, when their children have finished their A-levels and are thinking about higher education, their families are already saddled with debt and reluctant to take on more. Whilst I'm aware that the Department for Education is already reviewing the policy in relation to Scilly post-16 education, it's my understanding that a robust equalities impact assessment has not yet been undertaken by government. It is, however, very clear that families on Scilly do not have equal access to post-16 education. The council on the Isle of Scilly, who I've been working very closely with on this issue, has suggested a grant of £15,000 per student per year is required to ensure financial parity with those on the mainland and to meet the additional increased costs to enable the students to continue in their education or training. And I'd be grateful if the Minister could confirm that he will direct his officials in the Education Skills and Funding Agency to take Scilly's unique challenges into consideration when assessing the size of the grant, and to hasten a decision, as the next academic year is just 4 months away, Madam Deputy Speaker, and decisions about the next stage of a child's education are needed to be made immediately or imminently. When I corresponded with the Minister's predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Harlow, he made the point that young people all over the country have options to study in diverse and widespread locations, and it would not be financially feasible for local authorities to fund all the costs this involves. But families on Scilly do not have options. They have a straight choice between sending their child to a potentially unsafe environment or racking up thousands of pounds of debt. A number of parents told me they were considering leaving Scilly purely so that it was financially feasible to educate their children as law required. And the one thing that everyone on Scilly would like to say to this House is that when families leave, it becomes very, very difficult to maintain the services and all the things that are required to keep a community of about 2,200 people viable and going on a remote island setting such as Scilly. The cohort over the next few years fluctuates from 15 to 32 students. So I would submit to the Minister that it is not financially infeasible for the Department for Education to look seriously at the figure of 15,000 which the Council of Scilly has identified. We know that money allocated for Scilly in the government's Levelling Up Fund is not now going to be spent as intended. This would be an ideal opportunity for the government to show its commitment to these unique islands and to their future as thriving communities. And while the subject to this debate is the cost of post-16 education to families on Scilly, there are wider issues about how to ensure the welfare and well-being of Scilly's young people so that they can fully and appropriately engage with their education. The Council needs a capacity to commission packages of support for students on the mainland where necessary. This could be through bespoke packages enabling them to return to mainstream tuition after a period of absence. It could be through the Future Foundations programme, which, as the Minister will know, empowers students to aim high and achieve their potential. The Council aims to work with the Multi-Academy Trust, of which the Five Island Academy is a member, Five Island School, is a member, to provide opportunities for students to engage in extracurricular activities. And it wants to work with voluntary organisations such as Action for Children and Young People Cornwall to improve the offer for post-16 students outside the hours of formal education. And as I've hinted, there needs to be some money to set aside for contingency. These are not outlandish requests, Madam Deputy Speaker. All the officers the Council of Scilly want is to enable its students to remain safe in an unfamiliar environment, to remain gainfully and safely occupied outside the times of formal education, to have and to maintain good mental health and well-being, and to thrive socially, emotionally and academically. These are not unique requirements. They are what we all want for our children and our young people, and there's no reason why parents on Scilly shouldn't want the same. So I look forward to the Minister's comments on how he plans to ensure that the families on Scilly can have the same. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister Luke Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate on the extremely important subject of education on the Isles of Scilly. Whilst, of course, the Isles are a beautiful place, I completely appreciate the arguments that he has made, that due to the size of the islands, its location, the populations, that residents, of course, face a number of different issues and challenges, and he's a passionate advocate for them in this House. He has certainly clearly and eloquently set out one of those challenges, that there is no post-16 education on the Isles for its young people. The people of the Isles, I think, are extremely fortunate to have him batting in this House today to make that case so strongly. And I know, of course, that many parents will, from what he's described, face really difficult decisions regarding the next steps in their education of their children. And, of course, young people have to face that very difficult situation of going to the mainland for their education and for their training opportunities. And as he said, this involves travel, it involves living away from their homes at actually a relatively young age, which must be extremely daunting for them and no doubt create a number of different challenges. I think he set out very clearly the emotional and well-being issues that young people on the Isles face, and it was certainly, I think, a point that was made eloquently and with force. I think this is no doubt probably a set of issues that's difficult both for parents and for young people too, and actually completely sympathise with them, listening to the strong arguments that he's made. As my honourable friend has mentioned, all young people in the Isles, like across England, have to continue in education or training until they are 18. young people can choose to participate through full-time education, a job or volunteering, combined with part-time study, or by undertaking work-based training such as an apprenticeship. And of course, the government provides funding for a range of education training opportunities for young people to undertake. And continuing in education and training means that young people are given the opportunity to develop skills and qualifications that open doors for them to future employment, and to help them make the most of their potential and earn more over the course of their lifetime. Empowering young people to gain the skills they need to climb that ladder of opportunity into successful careers or study further is a top priority for us and DFE, and I think across the wider government too. So it's the immense credit of all the residents on the Isles of Scilly that, despite the unique and no doubt often challenging barriers that they face, that they are so determined to overcome all of them so that their children can continue into post-16 education and training. And of course, that point that they have so much so many more of those challenges than those on the mainland in many different instances, and challenges in accessing the benefits and opportunities that people on the mainland often enjoy. To support our commitment to ensure that young people across England, wherever they live, get high quality education opportunities, we are boosting 16 to 19 funding by an extra £1.6 billion in 24-25 compared with the financial year 21-22. We made further investment of £185 million in 23-24 and £285 million in 24-25. And overall, in the academic year 23-24, nearly £7 billion was allocated to institutions in programme funding for 16 to 19 education in order to help ensure that every young person has access to an excellent education. Young learners in Cornwall, which would include learners, of course, from the Isles, will benefit from this extra funding through receiving a high-quality teaching and learning experience in high-quality facilities. And, of course, the department does provide a range of financial support for students who need it, including those from the Isles of Scilly, to enable them to participate in post-16 education. That includes free meals, bursaries to help with the cost of education, whether that's travel or books, equipment, trips, plus support for childcare and residential costs where they are required. And students, of course, can speak to their education institution about accessing these funds. We do, of course, recognise, as was powerfully articulated just now, the unique situation of young people from the Isles of Scilly, and understand that the normal provision of funding in 16 to 19 education does not fully fit with their circumstances on the Isles. So in addition to receiving full funding for their learning, like other young learners across the country, for many years we've provided extra funds to help them meet the cost of travel to and from the mainland, and for accommodation on the mainland where they are staying. In the current year, as my honourable friend has said, the per student funding was increased by over 11%. That's now, as explained, £6,365. The number of students has grown, so this means we have increased the sort of total quantum of funding by over 40% this year compared with last year. But my honourable friend today has made, I think, a very powerful case that families on the island believe that that current level of support at £6,365 per student isn't sufficient and should be increased. As I pointed out, this figure is increased by 11% from last year, but I do understand the point that he makes about the challenges and the costs that families cite with increasing costs, and particularly with the reduced availability of host family accommodation, and that they feel that this does not cover the total cost of support for their children to travel for their post-16 education. I know my honourable friend and his constituents feel extremely strongly about this issue, so we will consider very carefully any request from the council that comes to us to provide additional funding for the scheme as part of the spending review. He's made that case very eloquently. As the minister responsible, I will be watching the matter very closely, and very happy to meet with him to talk about any proposals in more detail, perhaps with his council too at the appropriate time, because I do understand the point that he's made and the pressures on challenges that families in his community face. Turning to the issue that he raised about student well-being, he also talked very powerfully about the health and well-being of young people who are under 18 and living away from home and the impact that it has on them. I do appreciate that students from the Isles and their parents too need to make difficult choices about where these young people live when they study. And we heard that some decide to place young people with host families on the mainland, while some opt to take more expensive options like state boarding schools. And I agree with the point he makes ultimately. I agree that this is not a situation that lots of families want to see their family in. I understand the concerns that he's raised. As a parent myself, I felt it very keenly when he made the argument. And I know that the Council of the Isles publishes a model accommodation agreement for students and their parents to help ensure that the accommodation options are safe, and that this includes ensuring that where their child is placed with a host family, that adult members within the household will undergo a disclosure and barring service in a DBS check, and that colleges also provide general support for their students' well-being, including help with stress and anxiety, and advice and support on studying careers. As we know, this is of course a very unique situation, and it is important that students and families feel that the accommodation and travel arrangements are safe and secure and help them succeed in their post-16 education. That's why we do keep the scheme arrangements under review, and my officials are in regular contact with the Isles Council about how it's working, but I think he's made the point powerfully, he's made it well, and I'm very happy to discuss it further. He also talked about post-16 education and training opportunities, and I think he was quite right to raise that point. The Council estimates, I think he quoted this number in his speech, that there are around 48 students who are aged 16 to 19 who will be taking part in education or training this year. Of course, a cohort of this size, of course, makes it difficult at this stage to deliver face-to-face post-16 education on the Isles themselves, because of all the logistical challenges that would create. So to undertake face-to-face education, young learners have to travel to the mainland. I know, of course, and I think he referenced a couple in his speech, there are a number of sixth form colleges and sixth forms and other options, but the most popular are Truro and Penrith College and Cornwall College, which between them provide a range of post-16 provision, and that these providers offer a wide variety of options, with the colleges working increasingly well together to avoid duplication of the offer to students from the Isles of Scilly, and to ensure that the widest variety of high-quality options are available to learners in the area, including those from the Isles. It is, of course, not ideal that learners from the Isles have to travel so far and live away from home, despite the support which is available and all the costs and the help the colleges provide. And my honourable friend spoke passionately about that. And I think also about the sort of collective challenges, that this isn't just a challenge about post-16 education, it's lots of different elements of life for people on the Isles, and that this is just one element of the challenges that they face. And I think that point was made very well. So I do want to assure him that we would be open to consideration about other approaches if parents and education institutes prefer, if they have workable alternatives. For example, if some courses could be accessed via distance rather than face-to-face learning. So we're very happy to have that conversation with him as well. I do think he's made a strong case about this issue. I know he's raised it before, and he's a strong advocate for reform and doing more in this area too. I do want to thank him for bringing this debate to the floor of the House this evening. I think he made some really important points about the post-16 education for young people on the Isles of Scilly and the difficulties that both they, and I think potentially their families, face too in the provision of this type of education, and ensuring they have the access to take up these type of opportunities. It's certainly clear that students from the Isles are in quite a unique situation in this matter, and no doubt probably a range of other matters too, and I do appreciate the challenges that they face. We will keep the scheme arrangements under review. My officials are in regular contact with the Council on the Isles and will listen to any other suggestions or alternatives that the Council or my honourable friend wish to talk through. Can I perhaps just close by paying tribute once more to the people of the Isles of Scilly? It is a huge credit to them that they are determined to overcome all of these different logistical and challenges that they face in trying to access post-16 education and training, like many other people across the country, though it is through my honourable friend's tireless campaigning that he is ensuring that these issues are being heard at the top of government, and I very much thank him for it.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As may that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.